Hi there, Sandra here from Create in Spain. Today I'm going to be trying to save you some money. Now there's been a lot of YouTube videos and things in craft magazines, I'm sure, about watercolour brush pens. Now it's one of those things with crafting that once one manufacturer does something, other manufacturers do tend to jump on the bandwagon, and now there are so many different brands of watercolour brush pens that it's mind-boggling. Do you actually want them? Do you actually need them? Carry on watching to find out. Now, I have quite a selection of different pens, and I have quite a selection of different watercolour pens, but they are not all exactly the same. There are the ones which are just containers for water with a brush on the end. These are what I would class as a necessity. These are great. Yes, you can do it without them. This makes it so much easier. And if you like to go on holiday with your craft supplies, or you want to go to some kind of function with them, this makes doing watercolour while you're away or travelling around and about a whole lot less messy. This particular set was a set of 3 that I got a couple of years ago, probably now, from Lidl. You can buy them all sorts of places. You can buy them online in craft shops, stationers. There are different brands of them. They're very, very similar, and all you need to really look for is whether you want a round tip like this or whether you want a flat brush or a different shape, because you can get them in different shapes and sizes now. Now I have one type of pen here which is a little different, because this, although it's water soluble, this pen has not only got a bullet nib, but it is gouache. So this is not transparent in its natural state. If I use this palette here to demonstrate, that provides pretty solid colour. And if I were to use it on here, it looks very much like a normal felt tip would look, but it's not transparent. This is gouache. Now this is really good if you want to lay down some quite thick colour and you don't want it to be as transparent. So a different variety. This particular one is one of this set. I bought them because they were marketed as metallic. There's a gold and a silver in here which are metallic, but the rest of them are not. I didn't bother to return them simply because I quite like the pens anyway. It was only about €9 and they're good for various things. If I was to pick it up with the brush, I get a much more delicate result and it's easy to use. Okay, so that's that one. Now I have some other ones which are dedicated watercolour brushes. Right, so this is a koi colouring brush pen. I got these in a set of 8, I think it was, in Lidl, again, several years ago. Now these have what they call a brush tip, but it's actually like a compacted foam tip. It has a brush shape, but it's not overly soft. So you get that pointed effect, but you can also use it on the side to get a wider stroke. This one was also from Lidl, and this is Marabou watercolour pen. Now this is a double tip one. So on one end we have a small bullet point, and then we have again the same type of brush point as we had with the koi, and that is their version of it. Now koi is from Sakura, a well-known brand. They are very, very similar. It's really only the colours and the fact that this is a dual tip one that makes a difference. They'll work in exactly the same way. This one, however, is a Chromatech brush pen, watercolour brush pen, and this has a proper brush. So it has a brush similar to this, only it's got the colour in it. This is actual brush work that you can do with this. So if you use this and put it down, and then you do this, you have a softer effect because it's got a brush tip and not a marker type bullet tip. That is what makes the real difference there. I have another one which has a different type of tip altogether. This one is not, strictly speaking, a watercolour brush. This is one designed for writing, and this one is by Pentel. This is their Touch, Pentel Touch. These are designed for writing, so they're very, very fine tipped, as you can see, but it is water-based. So if you want detail, these are an easy way of getting watercolour detail, because you can still get a watercolour brush and dilute it and do whatever you want to do with your line. But if you want that watercolour in a very fine tip, that's not a bad idea. Then we have this type. This is a, got to read it, Cali Creative Duo Tip. This is designed for writing, but again, it has watercolour in it, not alcohol. So you have a flat chisel tip on one end, and you have a very, very fine point on the other. So again, if you want to add watercolour detail, then these might be what you want. They will, of course, make marks which are very obvious, and they will make thicker marks. So unless you want that type of mark on your paper, use it in a palette in order to get a wash from it. So I have here the Karaoke Aquarelle, which is relatively new to the market, and this has what they call a brush tip, but it's not, again, a true brush. This is just a very long, and it is in fact very stiff, long, thin felt tip. Why they call that a brush tip, I am not quite sure. It is, however, perfectly good if you want to use it from a palette. Take your water brush and do a wash. It will work very well indeed. Now we come to what is in fact the cheapest variety of thing that you can possibly get for doing this. And this is children's felt tips, washable felt tips. Now they do not have very, very fibrous brush tips or anything like that. This is quite chunky, although you can do fine lines with them if you're just using the tip. The other side is a different colour, and if you use it on the side, of course, you get more watercolour out of it. These are what they class as super washable. Now obviously if you have a set of 24 of these, then you end up with 48 colours, and they are dirt cheap. They are really, really cheap. Now I don't know how available they are in the US, but certainly in Europe you will find them all over the place. They're made in Italy. So you can get them in different versions. You can get ones which have just got the one tip, or you can have these which have got the two. And if you want far more colours, then it makes sense to have the two, because you're not likely to use it all up very rapidly, and it gives you more options. And again, you would just use this with a watercolour brush to get your watercolour transparent washes. So I've used all these different things for probably a couple of years now, and to be perfectly honest, it's just a case of choice. Unless, and there is a big proviso, if you are doing anything for sale and you need it to be UV resistant, then you probably want to check the manufacturer specifies that their product is going to be UV resistant. But if you're just doing it for card making, for your own personal use, etc., use what you want. If you want to have an actual brush, then use a brush. But Is it a problem to just do a little dabbling on a palette, or indeed on the back of a stamp block or anything else? Because it'll all come off with water, it's not going to damage anything. You can even do it on the side of your mat if you want to. It'll come off with water if you've got silicone mat. So do you really care about the type of tip that you're going to have? Now, brush tips can be great for doing certain things because they have a fine point, but they can be uncontrollable. If, for example, I was trying to get into some very tight areas, you can do it with a tip, but if you need to follow a line, for example, it's not perhaps quite as easy as you might think it would be. It's easier if you've got to do something very precise to just use something which has got a solid tip, because that is going to be easier to make it follow a set line. So maybe you want the brush tip and maybe you don't. But even if you do want a brush tip, if you have something like this in your arsenal, you can use whatever colour you like and still get exactly the same effect without buying extra supplies. You know, if you've got children in the house, the chances are you already have watercolour felt tips, washable felt tips. Are they cheap to buy? Most certainly. This is what makes it worthwhile. Don't worry about the tip which is on your felt tip. You really don't need to, because they will all act the same if you have a water brush. You don't need to worry about the rest. So you can save your money for other supplies. We don't want to spend money on things that we don't have to spend money on. If you've got the money, you want to buy ones, special brush tip ones, that's fine. But if you don't want to spend it and you're quite happy to use a surface or a palette or an old tile or something to scribble on and then take the paint from that, then by all means use something entirely different. It will make no difference to the outcome at the end of the day on your cards or whatever. They all do the same thing. It's just a case of what colours you're using, how you use your colours, and what colours you can get your hands on. That's it. Okay, I hope I've managed to save you some money. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon. Take care now.